Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to play the role of Marvel News Reporter, bringing you new announcements that have been made and some things that were not really announced but sort of leaked to the public, made public, some sort of drama issue that relates to Marvel, so therefore it also relates to Marvel Future Fight, and we can use this with our sort of future telescope to look into the future and kind of guess what may or may not happen. Now, of course, these are just guesses, this is just speculation, so we don't actually have any idea, but I'm pretty confident, I'm fairly certain that this game, Marvel Future Fight, is going to be around for at least the next 3 or 4 years, and all of the speculation that I'm going to do today in relation to new announced content will happen within that time frame anyways. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually the sort of the negative thing. It is that Sony and Marvel have not reached or have sort of broken down their renegotiations for Spider-Man. Now, for those of you that are completely unaware of the sort of issue, I'll give a really brief summary. Back in the 80s, Marvel, before it was owned by Disney, was desperate for money, so they sold a bunch of their products, they sold a bunch of their characters, the sort of intellectual property. That's why for a long time the Fantastic Four were owned by a different company, Paramount, I believe, and that's why, or Universal or something, and that's why bad movies or less than great movies were being made about the Fantastic Four, because one of the stipulations for these characters is that movies need to be made within a certain window of time, whether it's 3 years or every 5 years, in order for that company to maintain ownership of the idea. Otherwise, it gets thrown back, it gets sent back to the original owner, which is Marvel. Now that owner would technically be Marvel and Disney because Disney bought Marvel. So in this case, Sony owns the right to Spider-Man, they own the right to Venom, and they own the right to a bunch of, I say a bunch because I've seen some sources saying like 500 related characters. I've seen some say like 900 related characters. Anyways, a lot of characters in the Spider-Man universe. So like the Sinister Six, those types of characters would technically belong to, as far as movie rights go, they would belong to Sony. Now, they had negotiated an agreement, they had come to an agreement, and that's why Spider-Man appeared in the Civil War movie, where he webbed up Captain America's shield, etc. And then he also appeared in other MCU movies, and of course Infinity War Endgame, and then of course he was in very MCU-themed Sony movies, Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. Those were still technically produced and distributed by Sony, but they had the MCU logo at the beginning, and they had that sort of MCU feel. And they reference a lot of MCU characters like Iron Man, like Nick Fury, who are not owned by Sony. Those are Marvel, Disney characters. But what this announcement means, or what this sort of publicity means for the breakdown in their agreement, is that there's not going to be that continued partnership. Now, that could mean a lot of different things. It could mean not that many things. Now, there are also some outlets out there, some YouTube channels kind of jumping on the hype and creating the videos saying that there's a new agreement being reached. I haven't read anything from a legitimate news source that indicates that there is a new deal being reached between Sony and Disney and Marvel. From what I've heard, from what I've read, Kevin Feige, who is the sort of creative brain behind most of the content, whether it's movies or now TV shows coming out for Disney Plus, and that's going to reference other things that I have to say in this video later on. He just has too much on his plate. He's too busy juggling all of this content, all of these characters, and he just doesn't have time to also work with Sony for Spider-Man. So that means a couple of things. For one, it means not Yondu. For one, it means that Spider-Man may not continue the story at the end of Far From Home. He may or may not continue that story. Sony may decide to go in a different direction for Spider-Man, and it will also probably mean that future MCU movies, at least for the time being, if an agreement is not reached, a new agreement, won't feature Spider-Man. Now, some people will react really negatively to this. They'll be really upset. Some people are kind of, they don't really care. They're on the other side of the boat. I'm sort of in between. On the one hand, I want to see Spider-Man finish off that story, because if you haven't seen the end of Far From Home, there's an amazing cliffhanger, and I want to see that story sort of told. Even if it doesn't actually get, everything that I want out of that story, I want to see where they go with that story. But on the other hand, I also want to see new content. So I would like the MCU to go in different directions other than constantly leaning on the sort of titular characters, the super popular, super casual, friendly characters like Spider-Man. It's like DC making every movie have Batman in it. Even if it's not a Batman movie, he's somewhere in the movie. He's referenced at least for a few minutes. I get sort of bored of that, and as much as I love Batman, I want to see other content. So I'm sort of 50-50. What it basically boils down to, without going too deep into my opinion, is basically this, because I don't know the exact specifics of the Sony-Marvel deal. Apparently, Marvel asked for more money, and apparently Sony wasn't going to make a deal or a renegotiation with them anyways. But it basically boils down to this. If Marvel and Disney really want to make the best possible Spider-Man movie for the fans, whether they're making the movie themselves, if it's an MCU title like Infinity War, or whether they're just helping Sony make a movie that they're going to eventually produce and make the majority of the profit from, that's up to Marvel. If Marvel wants to do that, then they can take less money from Sony and they can reach an agreement for the fans. On the other hand, if Sony wants to do their own thing, then all of the pressure and all of the responsibility will rest on their shoulders. So if Sony makes a bad Spider-Man movie, and that's an if, not a when, if Sony makes a bad Spider-Man movie, then they will be solely held responsible by the court of public opinion when that movie, if that movie, doesn't do well, either commercially, critically, or both. So that's really how I see things. Marvel has their opportunity, Disney has their opportunity, but so does Sony. I personally liked Venom. I personally thought Into the Spider-Verse was absolutely fantastic. So I don't think Sony is guaranteed to fail with this, the way that people thought, the next Fantastic Four movie is going to be garbage, no matter what, unless it goes back into Marvel's hands. This, I think, is more of an up-in-the-air situation. I'll continue to monitor it. I might make an additional video if sort of an agreement is reached between Sony and Marvel, Disney. But what that basically means for us is a big, fat question mark. I have no idea if Spider-Man is going to get another uniform for the foreseeable future. That could be 2 years, that could be 3 years, that could be 4 years. It really just comes down to if Marvel will continue to promote Spider-Man, because essentially it's not Netmarble's choice at all. If Netmarble wants to make an update, let's say they want to make in a year, they want to make a Spider-Verse update. They want to introduce Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, and they want to give a new uniform to Spider-Man. They want to give a new uniform to Silk and Spider-Gwen. They have to pitch that idea to Marvel and Disney. Now, if Marvel, if Bill Roseman, if Danny Koo, all those guys, if they want to do that and they have the okay from the Marvel executives and the Disney executives, then that will be fine, and we can get that in Marvel Future Fight. But if they don't want to promote Spider-Man because, for whatever reason, you can come to those conclusions on your own, then we will not get any sort of Spider-Man content in a future update for Marvel Future Fight until an agreement is reached. Now, before the agreement was reached, I believe, because it only happened around Civil War, we had already gotten some Spider-Man content. So if you want to look at it that way, we had Renew Your Vows, which was way before Civil War, and we had All New, All Different, which was again before Civil War, and then of course we got Civil War. So looking at the past, even when Sony had Spider-Man and wasn't sharing it, so to speak, with Marvel and Disney, we were getting Spider-Man content. It wasn't a lot, but it was more than nothing. So I think that does create some optimism, some hope for the future of Spider-Man. I don't think it's bleak. I don't think we're doomed to never see an upgrade from the Far From Home Spider-Man suits that we got, but it just may not be as often as we expected it to be, or as often as it's been lately. Like lately, Spider-Man's been getting tons of loves, multiple uniforms per year, basically. He's gotten 4 uniforms in 2 years, which is pretty bananas, considering some characters never get uniforms. So that's kind of the shakedown, and that's what things are going on and happening in regards to Spider-Man. The second thing I want to talk about more briefly, but also not more importantly, but it's a bit more interesting, is the D23. It's like Disney 23 conference announcements. So they made a whole bunch of announcements for future content, comics, TV shows, Disney Plus, animated stuff, movies, and 3 of the announcements in particular got the attention of the fans and of a lot of Marvel Future Fight fans, and I'll explain why. So of the announcements, 3 of them in particular were new TV shows that are going to be coming to Marvel Plus. They There's Miss Marvel, which is Kamala Khan, she's right here. And then we have Moon Knight, which is, of course, over there next to me. And then to the right of Spider-Man, She-Hulk. So She-Hulk, Moon Knight, and Miss Marvel were all announced, and they were put on that Phase 4 sort of timeline along with WandaVision, Winter Soldier and the Falcon, Loki, and the Marvel What If, and maybe one other show I can't remember. Oh, Hawkeye. So they were put on that Phase 4 lineup. Now, just to give you an indication of when that's going to be happening, if their timeline is chronological, which I would think that it is, they have WandaVision near the beginning, happening in the spring of 2021, which is still pretty far away. It's like almost 2 years away, but okay, 2021, which would mean if the things that come after WandaVision are later, it would mean that these shows, Miss Marvel, Moon Knight, She-Hulk, would be coming at the end of 2021 or possibly in 2022. So that's up to 3 years from now, which is a long, long time to wait. But really the only sort of positive and optimistic thing to pull from that is the fact that a few days before, now this D23 stuff all came out yesterday, which was the 24th, I believe, or possibly the 23rd, but way back on the 21st of August, which is clearly before D23 announcements, we got this post on Twitter and Facebook from Marvel Future Fight saying, "Did you know Moon Knight's first comic debut was this month 44 years ago? Show off Moon Knight on your team." Now, it's cool to big up Moon Knight. He's a lesser known character. He's a much less played character in Marvel Future Fight, but it's pretty random that it's 44 years ago. I mean, to choose this year in particular, if it was something like a bicentennial or whatever, a quarter centennial, if it was 25 years or 50 years or 100 years, I mean, it wouldn't be 100 years, but if it was some sort of round number like that, I could totally understand. If it was 80 years and it was to synchronize with Marvel's 80th anniversary, again, I can totally understand. That makes total sense from a regular PR point of view, but 44 years, it's a bit weird. It's a bit of an odd number, and it's very coincidental, for those of you that don't believe in coincidences as much, that they're doing this just a couple of days, just, 48, 72 hours before a Moon Knight show is announced for D23. And there had already been rumors of Marvel putting up acting calls for auditions for a Moon Knight type character, for someone who's playing sort of a violent, sort of multi-personality type person. So it'll be interesting to see if we get a Moon Knight update. That's basically what I'm indicating and what I'm implying. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I'm saying it's a possibility. Now, there's basically two ways this can go. This could either be purely a coincidence, or it could be some hint, some indication that we're getting a Moon Knight update or a Moon Knight rework sometime in the future. I'm sure Marvel Future Fight has access to the data of characters, and I'm sure they can see how many players are playing with a specific character. Because if you go in and you look, you can see this when you go into rankings and you go by popularity. So you can just go here and search, and you can see that some of these characters are so far down the list that they're basically never, ever, ever used. And I'm sure Moon Knight's going to be at the bottom here because he's absolutely garbage. Out of 197 characters, he's 164th. That's literally as low as it goes. So I'm sure Marvel Future Fight and the Netmarble devs look at this and they see, wow. They see, how bad it is. And they see, that he's a completely, these are all paid characters, so that's why they're at the bottom. But out of the completely farmable characters, once we hit a completely farmable character that you don't have to pay crystals for, Sin. Sin is basically the first character that you can unlock with biometric selectors from Shadowland that is not an ultimate, that is not being used. So out of 176, you have Cho, you have Absorbing Man, you have Crossbones, Silk, Whiplash, Kingpin, Hellcat, and Moon Knight. So he's literally in the bottom 10 of Bioselector characters, which is embarrassing because Bioselectors are so plentiful. It's obvious that he's garbage. I don't need to do this to show you that he's absolute trash. Moon Knight's one of the worst characters in the game. Low, extremely anemic offense, and his heal is like 2016 worthy. It's nothing anymore. So yeah, this could be an indication that Marvel Future Fight and the devs are acknowledging that they have weak characters, and they may want to rework some of these characters in anticipation of the series. The third option is sort of the worst case scenario for all you Moon Knight fans, for all you Miss Marvel and She-Hulk fans, and that would be that Marvel Future Fight and the Netmarble devs are committed to only updating these characters when their series comes about. Now again, that could be influenced by the Marvel and Disney executives. They could be telling their games, listen, We've got these things lined up, planned for the future. We want you to make content for them to create this sort of cross-referencing. So the fans who play our games will have perhaps a discount, like a 10% discount on their first month of Disney Plus if they go and they link their account to their Disney Plus and they watch our content. You know, you should make an update when Winter Soldier and Falcon lands. You should make an update for those characters, make some sort of thematic game mode or sort of event around those characters to promote them, and then also have a banner in-game that promotes this new Disney Plus content. Why not? They've got all these eyeballs staring at their phones playing their games. Why not use that to advertise their other media, their social media, whether it's YouTube or Twitter, or it's advertising their media, advertising their comics. We've seen those notices, etc. It makes total sense. So what's going to happen, I don't know, but those are basically the three options. It's complete coincidence. There's going to be a in anticipation of the update of the show's update, or it's going to happen when the shows land. But that is basically all I wanted to catch you guys up on as far as new information goes. There is sort of a rumor circulating right now on Facebook and Line that there's a tier 3 symbol hidden somewhere over here from Moon Knight. No. First of all, this is not a sneak peek for a new update. Second of all, the sneak peeks are only going to start happening like in a week, so we're still like more than 7 days away at this point. And also, remember, the Mysterio mistake. Let's call that the MM. I was like, oh, Mysterio's got 3 fingers in each hand? That's definitely tier 3 Mysterio, guys. Don't worry, I've got this. Big brain time. No. When they make a tier 3 announcement, when they sneak peek a tier 3, it's deadly obvious. So their version of obvious would be like Moon Knight with, you know, a rip in his pants, and it would be like Moon Knight just got into a big fight. He's got to power up for this enemy, and then in the rip, there's a scar, and the scar is bloody, and it says T3. That would be T3 Moon Knight. But, you know, going in, zooming in to 1000%, and then drawing some lines here, no, that's not tier 3. People are just pulling your leg. They're just having a good time. Just have a laugh about it, and remember, MM. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of the information and the catch-up for Spider-Man, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, and She-Hulk. So many M's, dang. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. And, of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.